Hello and welcome to Standpoint Zero. I'm Jason Michael McCann. We have been paying close attention to the war in Ukraine because, without doubt, this is the most important conflict in our generation. Because as a US-Russian proxy war, which it is, it has all the potential to escalate quickly into a global nuclear conflict. So we have to be informed about this war. The Western narrative has it that Russia has invaded a wholly innocent sovereign state. But we are critical of this position. Now, we will not justify what Russia has done. The position of Standpoint Zero and my own personal position as a pacifist is that war is always wrong. There were other ways for Russia to deal with this. But in not justifying this conflict, we can understand that there were reasons why it happened. Standpoint Zero is committed, insofar as we are looking at this war in Ukraine, to look closely at the causes of this conflict, because there will be no peace unless we understand the mechanisms and the dynamics that have led to this war. President Putin of Russia laid out the reasons why Russia went to war, or why he believes Russia should have went to war. He named denazification and demilitarization. Let's just think about this idea of demilitarization, because in all honesty, Ukraine, without any other help, was never a threat to Russia. But the threat was not Ukraine. The threat was Western involvement in the politics and militarization and NATOization of Ukraine. When Germany was united or reunited in the early 1990s, the American government promised the then Soviet government and its leader Mikhail Gorbachev that if Germany was reunited and aligned to NATO, then NATO would not advance to the east. NATO broke that promise, and NATO has done nothing since that time but move further and further east, touching now the Russian border in the Baltics, and now hoping to NATOize and move into countries like Georgia and Ukraine. And this has always been seen as the reddest of red lines for Russia. In the while that this has been happening, the United States has been arming Ukraine. It has been training Ukrainian paramilitaries, right-wing Nazi paramilitaries, for a long insurgency with Russia, designed to draw Russia into a trap where, at the cost of Ukrainian lives, not US or NATO lives, will weaken and destabilize Russia, and thus further US objectives. When superpower states behave like this, and in this case the United States too has misbehaved, and so has NATO as an alliance, which no longer has a reason to exist after the end of the Cold War. When nations or states behave like this, they are provoking others to act. We are thinking here about measures and countermeasures. NATO has constantly been making measures against Russia, or taking steps against Russia, that now we are seeing a Russian reaction to. And this reaction is violent, and it means that the Ukrainian people are suffering. Now, we must make a distinction between the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government. The Ukrainian government, we like to think of, or we are being told of in the Western narrative, is a sovereign democratic government. But no, recent history shows that not to be the case. Again, we are looking at a classic American colour revolution, where in 2014 a right-wing Nazi orchestrated coup brought down the elected government of Yanukovych and established a coup government that abandoned its traditional neutrality and non-alignment and sought NATO membership. At this point, the Ukrainian government, and hence the state, become part of a NATO threat to Russia. This, perhaps more than anything else, gives the reason why Russia and its president Vladimir Putin felt that they had to act before Ukraine fully joined NATO, which was the pretense at the time. So no, we will not justify what Russia has done. But we must understand, if we are to have any hope of understanding this conflict at all, that this is not a case of Russia being bad and America being good. It's more complex than this. What Russia has done is bad. It invaded its sovereign neighbour. But it did this for a set of reasons that were concerned with Russia's own security. And at the end of the day, Russia's job is not to look after the world or to be concerned with what other countries in the world think about it. The job of the Russian government is to look after the well-being and state security of Russia. And that is precisely what Russia has done here, for good or for bad. And any honest analysis or study of this conflict has to begin with accepting the realities and accepting the validity of the causes without justifying what has happened. And that's what we at Standpoint Zero fully intend to do.